Well, so this video is going to be about how to fix a lawnmower, any lawnmower, that starts and then dies. This particular one has a manual prime system on it, so we'll give it a few primes. So when this happens, typically what it means is your carburetor is plugged up. There's tiny little holes and passageways inside of these small carburetors called jets. And over time, they can get gummed up because of old stale gas, or they can get debris in them, which also causes the same sort of situation. So we'll go ahead and remove this top part here, and we'll remove the air filter box, and then we'll be able to see the carburetor more clearly. And here's some of the tools that you'll need. You'll need some carburetor cleaner, a ratchet with an extension, and I believe that's a 5/16 inch socket, a 1/2 inch socket, a 1/4 inch socket, and a 3/8 inch socket. Most parts on the outside of a lawnmower are in those 4 sizes. You also need a pair of vice grips or fuel line clamps to pinch off the fuel line so it doesn't drip fuel everywhere when you take everything apart. So let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and remove the filter. Set that aside. And now we have access to these 2 bolts here and another bolt that's up here that you'll have to remove to get to the carburetor. First, I'm going to go ahead and pull this top part off just so we can have a little bit easier access. So now with that off, one other thing that's worth mentioning is there's a tiny little gasket that goes behind here that goes into the throat of the carburetor, and if these 2 bolts are not seated all the way down or tight enough, and the primer bulb also will not work right. So it's important to have these tightened down after you replace these gaskets or take these filters off. So it's now completely detached. There's this small line here. Just go ahead and pull that off with it. That's just a PCV line. Don't wreck or destroy that because it's kind of important. And then, as I said, there is a gasket that goes on the back. Make sure it's still intact. And now we have access to the carburetor. And so the first thing that I usually do at this part is I remove the fuel line that's going to the carburetor, because I'm going to be removing the carburetor from the motor. Now I just got to remove these 2 bolts right here, and the carburetor should come right off. So now the carburetor has completely been removed. We have it right here. So the first thing you're going to do is pop the bowl off. That's a 1/2 inch bolt at the bottom. So now I have the aforementioned parts taken out. Go ahead and drop that gasket. Don't lose that. And then you can always look through the center hole on the side right there, and then there's a top hole up here. Now what you want to do is get some carb cleaner and just give it a nice thorough cleaning. Some people like to use carb cleaner, some people like to use the air hose method, the compressed air. Either way works fine. I've been doing this for 8 years and have not had a problem with either. Now you have your carburetor. I already dumped all the fuel out of it, but all the fuel was nice and clean. There's a little bit of gunge down there, so I'll go ahead and clean that out a little bit with some carb spray and a small brush. Not a big deal, but the fuel itself was clean and in good condition. So now we have the float, which seems to be actuating okay. The needle appears to be alright as well, but we'll go ahead and pull that little pin out. It's not pressed in there or anything, but you might need to use a pair of needle nose, and we'll go ahead and look at the needle in the seat. Also, removing this float gives us better access to the small jets and orifices that are underneath basically on the underside of the carburetor. So now I'll go ahead and pull that pin out. Don't lose it. I'm setting it right on top of the deck with the pliers. And then go ahead and pull your needle and float out. The needle looks a little dirty, so we'll clean that up a little bit. Float itself, as I noted earlier, looks okay. But go ahead and shake it around a little bit to see if there's any leaks in it. And now we can see the seat, which looks good. You guys can't really see it because of the camera, but everything in here looks fairly clean. But I'm going to go ahead and clean it out really well anyways. And so with some carb spray, I went ahead and cleaned it out really well. You want to aim the carb spray directly into the holes and just shoot it a few times. You don't need to do it, you don't need to sit there and hold down on the nozzle, but do it a few times. It'll be pretty obvious if anything in there is blocked up or not, but go ahead and shoot a little bit into the throat. Move the butterfly valve around a little bit, especially when you shoot into this one that's in here. You'll see it come up you'll see it come out of that little tube right there. It's called an emulsion tube, and that's basically what the Venturi effect does on any carbureted engine. When the air pressure changes, it sucks fuel through that little tube right there out of the bowl, and the bowl is of course fed by the gas tank. So I'm happy with this and satisfied, but as you guys can see, there is a very, very small, very tiny hole right there that actually looks like it's plugged up. I'll show you guys how to clean those out. They're not impossible, but they are kind of a challenge at some times. So honestly, the best way to clean these tiny little passageways out is to get these small wire, usually from a bristle brush, and just kind of poke it in there. Just kind of move it around a little bit. Just clean that hole out. As you guys can see, the hole is no longer plugged up. The camera I can just barely see that in the viewfinder. But sometimes little things like that can affect how these carburetors work, and so you always want to clean these out really well. So I'm happy with this carb cleaning. I'll go ahead and throw it all back together and throw it back on the mower and see if we can get it to start and stay running this time. So the tiny little needle, I went ahead and brushed it off with a bristle brush and cleaned it. These things are included with carburetor rebuild kits, but very rarely do you actually need to change them. It's just, cheap enough and easy enough to do that you just do it anyways, but more often than not you can get away with a nice good cleaning with these and you'll be fine. So go ahead and set it back into your float. Blow this off a little bit. It's hard to do this one-handed, but you basically need to line your needle up with this little hole here. On Honda carburetors it's a lot more difficult than that. And with it lined up, you just go ahead and repin it. I'm going to go ahead and brush this off with a bristle brush as well. As you guys can see, it's just a little bit too dirty for my liking. And so, it's been repinned. Go ahead and push it all the way through so it's nice and even on the other side. Might have to use the pliers again. And now it's nice and even, so we can go ahead and throw our bowl and bowl bolt back on as well. As far as the bowl bolt goes, it's always good to brush these off really well with a bristle brush. And then do the same thing with the bristle from the bristle brush and poke it right into the center and kind of move it around a little bit and get some of the varnish off and old fuel. I've seen these really badly plugged up before as well. You always want to keep these clean before you reinstall them. And so I just reinstalled the bolt after I cleaned it off and tightened it up with the 1/2-inch socket. So now we're ready to reinstall it on the lawnmower. So now that that part's finished, I went ahead and tightened both these bolts down very well. You can, at this point, go ahead and remove the vice grips from the fuel line. And then I always use the vice grips to bring that clamp forward again. There you have it. So now we'll go ahead and throw this air filter box back onto it because it needs that to run right. So we're almost ready to take it back outside. One thing I want to note is the primer bulb seems to work a little too well on this thing. So it might be that it should only be primed like once. Got my third hand in place. Let's go ahead and see if we can get it to start. So whoever buys this thing, I'll just have to make sure to tell them to only prime it like maybe once, twice at the most. So that's how you fix one of these things. It's really very simple. Now you just go ahead and throw your air filter and cover back on. And now with that on, you're ready to roll. Check how much fuel we have. Oh yeah, more than half a tank. And I'll check the oil too. This thing's going to need a cleaning again. And typically before I go and sell these things, I run them for about 20 or 30 minutes straight. Shut them off and then turn them back on a couple minutes later. And that assures me that it both runs without burning any oil, because I checked that. And then it also shows me that the magneto is working properly, because sometimes when these magnetos heat up, they quit working if they're starting to go bad and short out. So anyways, I hope you guys like this video. It's pretty simple. Like I said, this pretty much works with any lawnmower, small engine, whatever you have. Manufacturer doesn't matter, Honda, Kohler, Briggs & Stratton, Tecumseh. It's all the same thing. They all operate off the same principle. So now that that's done, I can go ahead and sell this thing finally. You guys all stay classy, rate, comment, subscribe.